Dust drifted in slow spirals as the afternoon train wailed its lonely farewell. On the cracked platform board stood Ella May Harlow, one hand gripping a worn carpet bag, the other holding tight to Clara, her 6-year-old with eyes too big for such a small face. Behind them, the engine's black plumes swallowed the memory of another train, the one that had carried her husband's coffin months ago. The wind off the prairie smelled of cinders and distance, carrying away the last trace of a home she no longer had. Copper Creek shimmered ahead, a sun-baked town where every storefront window seemed to hold a pair of watchful eyes. Ella's boots tapped the boardwalk with a tired rhythm, Clara clutching her rag doll close. A murmur of gossip followed them like a second shadow, low voices in the saloon doorway, the sweep of a glance from the mercantile window. Another rail widow, someone muttered, looking for a man's roof. The word stuck in Ella's ribs. She kept her chin level. Across the street, Jedediah Colton stepped out of the feed store, a tall, spare figure in a sweat-darkened hat. His left hand carried a grain sack. His right rested easy on the rail. He was known in town for his quiet manners and the way his eyes missed nothing. By his side, a dark-haired little girl lingered, her gaze drifting toward Clara before shying away. When Jed's eyes found Ella, there was no flicker of amusement, no judgment, only a measured stillness. He caught the tail end of the saloon keeper's whisper, saw the way Ella's shoulders tensed as if bracing against another blow. For a long breath, he studied her the way a man sizes up a skittish horse, not for weakness, but for what storms it had weathered. Later, outside the mercantile, he stopped her with a voice low enough that the street's gossip wouldn't catch it. "Your daughter needs a home," he said, eyes steady as fence posts. "My daughter needs a mother." Ella froze. Pride flared, quick and sharp, but behind it rose a wave of weariness she couldn't hide. She drew Clara close, lips pressed tight, and stepped past him into the street. Yet halfway down the boardwalk, against her will, she looked back. Jed was still watching, calm, unhurried, as though he knew a seed had been planted and the prairie had all the time in the world for it to take root. The first gift arrived before dawn, a sack of flour, set quietly against the livery loft door where Ella and Clara slept. No note, only the faint smell of cedar from the burlap. She knew who had left it. The next day, a neat stack of split firewood appeared, each log dry and clean-cut. Ella told herself she wouldn't be beholden, but when Clara laughed over warm biscuits for the first time in weeks, her resolve softened. Jed's kindness never came with questions, only small acts folded into the rhythm of town life. Sometimes his daughter, Abigail, came along, shy, watchful, her dark eyes following Clara with something like longing. The two girls began chasing tumbleweeds down the street, their laughter ringing above the creak of wagon wheels and the lowing of cattle. Ella, watching from the loft, felt the ache of something she thought she'd lost, the sound of children unafraid. Yet Copper Creek's gossip sharpened. Whispers swirled through the mercantile and along the church steps. Colton setting up that widow, they said, giving her more than charity. A bitter-tongued ranch widow, Mrs. Holloway, cornered Ella outside the well. Men who take in strays, she said with a smile that wasn't one, expect obedience, not partnership. The words clung to Ella's skin, feeding the old fear that Jed's offer was nothing more than a bargain in disguise. Then, one black-bellied evening, the wind came hard from the north, bringing rain like fists against the loft roof. Clara shivered under a thin blanket, her forehead hot with fever. Panic clawed at Ella. Medicine cost more than she carried in her purse. Before she could think what to do, boots thudded on the stays. Jed stood in the doorway, rain running from his hat brim, Abigail in his arms wrapped in a quilt. He didn't ask permission. He knelt by Clara's side, laid a cool cloth on her brow, and set a small bottle on the crate beside her. Through the night, he kept the fire alive, his face unreadable in the flicker. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the only sound was the slow easing of Clara's breath. When morning broke, pale and clean, Ella looked at Jed across the small space between them. For the first time, the weight in her chest loosened. He had given nothing with strings, and that, she realized, was harder to refuse than any offer he'd made. Sunday morning brought clear skies and the toll of the small church bell. Ella walked with Clara toward the steps, her dress mended neat though threadbare. Jed stood ahead with Abigail, his quiet nod greeting her without presumption. But as they climbed, Mrs. Holloway's voice cut through the hum of conversation. "Guess you'll marry for shelter," she said, eyes gleaming, "same as you live for charity." A hush rippled down the steps. Ella felt the heat rise in her cheeks, the sting of every whispered word she had swallowed since stepping off the train. She turned, her voice steady but carrying. "A home is not charity when you build it together." For a moment, the town held its breath. Even the wind seemed to pause. Mrs. Holloway's smile faltered, and the gossip faded to the sound of boots on wood. That evening, the light was fading to a copper wash when wagon wheels crunched over the dirt outside the loft. Jed climbed down, his hat brim shadowing his eyes, Abigail seated in the wagon bed beside a space cleared for two more. He didn't speak right away, only stood there as the cicadas sang in the heat. Then, with the same plain honesty as before, he said, "Not for pity, not for need, but because I'd rather walk this life with you than alone." Clara looked from him to Abigail, then to her mother. The two girls exchanged shy smiles that spoke of shared secrets yet to be made. Ella felt the tight knot inside her finally give way. Without a word, she began lifting their few belongings into the wagon. Jed took the heavier pieces, setting them down with the care of a man building something that mattered. They set out as the sun dipped, painting the prairie in long strokes of golden shadow. The girls nestled together in the back, their heads bent in quiet conversation. Ella sat beside Jed, the warm wind tangling her hair, the horizon stretching wide and forgiving. And somewhere in the memory of the man who would one day tell this story, the moment was set in amber, not a gunfight, nor a grand declaration, but the slow hitching of two lives to the same road. A reminder that sometimes the truest home is the one built in the quiet between storms.